Hey folks, in this video, we're going to get into some tips and tricks for importing your Good Streets CAD file from CAD into Sketchup, so that from there you can start developing your model. Now, I'll start by saying that I realize this here is probably not what your current site looks like. This is really just for demonstrating the fundamentals of importing your CAD file into a Sketchup file. However, you will be able to use all these tools we're going to discuss today when you're working on your area that you're doing for Project 2 of Plan 606. So right off the hop, I'm going to assume that once you've picked the area that you're dealing with for Project 2, you are comfortable enough with using the lay-del command that you can successfully clean your CAD drawing up and essentially pare it down to just the stuff that you're going to want to import to SketchUp. Now, just as a quick refresher, lay-del is just L-A-Y-D-E-L. You hit enter, and then you pick everything that you essentially want to delete, and it will delete that entire layer. So let's go ahead and let's pick this, the light standard, these other extraneous little pieces of information we just don't need right now. And once we say we've cleaned it up satisfactorily, we're going to remember to hit enter, tab up to Y for yes, and hit enter once more. Now, before we go any further, there is something I want you to all make sure you check. We're going to go ahead and check and make sure that we're working in meters right now. Go ahead and type UNITS for units, hit enter. And as you can see, yes, we are working in meters. And that's just going to be useful for us because then when we're opening a new SketchUp file that we're going to import this into, we can make sure that's in meters as well. So we're not going to have to worry about having any issues with scaling. Let's go ahead and hit OK. Now let's say we're happy with how much we've pared our lines down. But watch what happens when we go up to the Layers panel here and go to the drop-down menu. Look at all the layers that are still in this CAD file. That's way too many. When AutoCAD tries to export that into SketchUp, that's going to be way too many unnecessary layers for SketchUp to process. So here's what we're going to do about that. We're going to type purge and activate the purge command. So P-U-R-G-E and hit enter. Now, this is going to be the screen that's going to come up. So purging really just means you're getting rid of any unnecessary items in CAD that you don't need at this stage. So when I set up my purges, I personally like to have all items checked, just so that anything that isn't actively being used and doesn't actively have a piece of content on that layer is getting removed. So we're going to move down to, you can type purge checked items. Since everything is selected here, we can left click, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to move, if you get this command, to purge all checked items. Let's left click. For safety, I always like to tap it more than once just to make sure it catches everything. And then we can go ahead and hit close. Now watch what happens when we go up to our layer drop down. Let's move up here. Let's left click, and look at that. That is way cleaner than it was before. There's still a number of layers there, but it's much less than we had before, and it's just much cleaner. So this being processed in SketchUp is just going to be that much easier. Great. So now that we're happy with how much we've cleaned our file up, let's move over to the file drop down. We're going to left click, go down to Save As, and move over to Drawing. We'll pick a location and title that we're happy with. This looks good. And we're going to go over to Save. Let's left click. And now we're ready to jump over to SketchUp. So now we're ready to open a new file in SketchUp, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we pick a template that is in meters. So let's go ahead and pick the architectural template in meters. Let's left click, and that will bring us into a SketchUp template with units that are in meters. So now we're ready to go ahead and import the CAD file that we just dealt with into this SketchUp file. Let's go ahead and move up to the file dropdown, left click, and we're going to scroll down to import. Let's left click. We'll pick the CAD file we just saved, select, and hit import. It'll give us a screen that's a little bit like this. You might get a prompt that says this is what your import result looks like. It'll really just specify how many layers, blocks, entities, that kind of thing have come in. So we're going to go ahead and go down to close. Now, If your imported CAD drawing appears way over here when you zoom out, not to worry. Let's just go ahead and left click it. We'll tap M for move. We'll pick a corner and we'll bring that import in just so that it's a little closer to our origin. Anywhere around here is just fine. Left click once more, tap left click, and let's zoom in and see what we have. Before we go any further, let's take a moment to zoom in here and then check and see if everything imported at a scale and to a dimension that is correct and that we're happy with. So let's move over to the toolbar. Let's left click tape measure tool, and let's pick a corner of a wall. We have a good idea of what the measurement of it is, and then let's pick another point. So this is telling me that this wall is 25.8 meters in length. If that sounds correct, then that means that your CAD file has been imported to the correct size, and we're ready to work. All right, let's take a look at what we've brought in here. We've got streets and roadways. We've got some building footprints. This is all great. So now we want to take all these great lines that we have there and turn them into actual faces that we can use push-pull to extrude and turn into some actual volumes. And I'm going to show you the generally accepted way to do this kind of stuff. So all of this imported as a group. That's perfect. That's what we want. Let's go ahead and double click into this group. Double click. Great. So now we're working inside of the actual group. Now, to push SketchUp to essentially form some actual faces in here that we can work with, you can just trace along one of these existing lines with the line tool. Let's go ahead and activate the line tool. Tap L, or pick it over here if you wish, and we'll trace along one of these existing lines to let SketchUp know what we want it to do. With our line tool, let's pick any line we want to trace along, left click, and then pick another point, end point, left click, and just like that, that has formed a face. From there, if we want to, we could push pull, we could extrude it, we could put a material on it, we could do whatever we wanted, because now we're working with an actual face. We can do the same thing along the sidewalks here. In some cases, just drawing a line in between some of these open faces is enough to essentially tell SketchUp we want to draw a surface there. Then later on, we can just clean up these lines in between using the erase tool. And again, all we're really doing is taking these lines that we've imported from CAD and we're providing the extra boundary information with these little extra line traces that are just giving SketchUp the information it needs to actually turn some faces out of all these lines. So again, usually with SketchUp, all it takes is usually just using the line tool, tracing a piece of that existing imported geometry from CAD, and that's enough to nudge SketchUp towards crafting it into an actual face. Now, once we have done this, we can go ahead and use the erase tool to clean out any of the extra lines we use to do the nudging for CAD. So you can use your erase tool to clean this part of your drawing up as much as you need to, so you have nice singular faces that you'll be working with. Just like so. And this is where it's really handy to have the erase tool, just for doing your little bit of cleanup work. Now that we've got some of these faces defined, we can already start giving some volume to our file here. Let's go ahead and jump over to the push-pull tool. Let's grab it right here. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the fact that we've now got a surface on our roadway, and we're going to make it so that there is some difference in height between the curb and the actual road. So let's say that we're dealing with a curb that is 14 centimeters in height, or 0.14 meters. We're going to go ahead, we're going to left click the road surface. We're going to start gesturing towards moving it downward because it's going to be a 0.14 meter drop. And then we're going to specify 0.14, type that in and hit enter. And just like that, we've already got a difference in elevation in our model for the curb. And if you're ever not sure, you can always hop over to the tape measure tool right over here, left click, and then pick a vertical top and then bottom to check that, yep, that's 0.14 meters. Perfect. That's just what we want. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit here. It's good that we're keeping all of our landscaping and topography for the site on one group, But we're going to go ahead and start drawing some of our massing separately. Here's how we're going to do it. First off, we've been working in this group the entire time. We're going to double click outside of it so that now we're working outside the group. Now that we're outside of this group, we can essentially start using the line tool to draw over top of some of these lines and start working on some built masses. Here's what we'll do. Let's go ahead and grab the line tool. Let's left click. And you'll notice that even though we're working outside of this group, we can still snap to all the different points on it. So let's go ahead and we're going to trace this building footprint that's right here. Let's left click. And I'm just going to move around to all of these points that we imported from the CAD. And these are all going to be useful to us because as I complete this shape that we're defining, it will ultimately produce a face. Now, if I select the space around it, that's all in that landscape group. But if I select this face, this is now a completely separate entity. And just for the sake of organization and moving buildings around, as I know that's a component of Project 2, at least for the studio portion of it, that'll be really useful to us. So we've got our building footprint and our landscape in separate layers. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. We can keep moving. At this stage, I'm going to recommend that we use the push-pull tool to give some actual volume to this shape. So let's move over here, or tap P for push-pull. Let's left-click. And just for now, we'll say that this is a 6-meter high building. So let's go ahead and tap 6 with the first, and then we'll hit Enter. Perfect. So just like that, we've now got a massed form that is on top of this group that makes up our landscape. Now, again, at this stage of the project, I will really recommend that you keep using groups to make sure that your different entities are staying separate from one another and they're easy to select and edit individually. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do at this point. Once you have a building masked, you can go ahead and left click and drag, and you're going to drag over top of just what you just drew. You're going to make sure that your box does not include the entirety of the landscape around it, because then that will select that whole group. We just want to select these pieces right here. Once we have them selected, again, just by left clicking and dragging over just the stuff we want to select that we just drew and release, we're going to right click and we're going to make that a group. So now the building that we've just pushed, pulled, and extruded is a separate group from the landscape around it. So if I were to move this building around, let's say I want it somewhere else, I could very easily do so without upsetting any other piece of my model. So these are just really strategies for keeping your SketchUp model organized as you start giving volume to it.